Hello, and thank you for joining us for another Changer Chat. I'm Grant Venable, Director of Change for Be the Change Volunteers. Today, I am joined by a friend who is a key stakeholder for BTCV and has generously invested in our organization's mission for many, many years with her time, talents, and treasures. Pam Plouhar spent her career with Johnson & Johnson, retiring as the Executive VP of Global Clinical Research. Pam uses her professional experience to support BTCV as a member of the Board of Directors, Advisory Council member, and team leader. Today, we get to hear her Changer story. Pam, welcome.
Thank you, Grant. It's a pleasure to be here.
Pam, I'm glad you're here, and you have served and led many BTCV teams. But before we dive into your service with BTCV, I want our audience to get some background on you and really know your story. So share with us about where you grew up, what your education was like, the advantages and some of the challenges that you had. Also, you had some dreams, I'm sure, like everybody does when they're in their education years. But tell us how education created opportunities and changed your life before starting your career with Johnson & Johnson.
So Grant, I'm the fifth of seven children.
Wow.
And I'm the fifth girl.
The fifth girl.
The fifth girl, yeah. So my parents had seven trying to get a boy. They got the boy as the last one and they quit. So I grew up in South Bend, Indiana, which is where I still live.
Okay.
And I started out going to a Catholic school.
Uh-huh.
And when I was in seventh grade, I transferred to a public school. And then I was in the public school system all through. And I've always excelled at science and math. That was true always growing up. And when I was a teenager, I would spend time with my dad. I was kind of a tomboy and I spent a lot of time with him. He was a carpenter.
Oh, great.
Contractor. And so I would help him with little projects and hold stuff for him and do that kind of stuff. And he would always tell me that I could be whatever I wanted to be and do anything I wanted to do, but that I had to go to school.
Mm-hmm.
I had to get an education. And I was actually the first member of my sibling group that completed a 4-year education. One of my sisters went to nursing school and the others went to kind of vocational schools. But I was the one that went to a full-fledged college.
Yeah. Did your parents have an opportunity to go to college?
They did. Well, my dad completed 3 years at Purdue.
Uh-huh.
And then he went into the Army.
I see.
And he was a captain in the Army. So they basically commissioned him into the Army right from college. And he never finished college then. And my mom never went to college. So
he saw there the value in education, and it was critical for you to get one.
Right. You know, my younger brother and sister are both went to 4-year colleges and got degrees. But I was the first one, and my older sisters made a big point of letting me know that this was a big deal.
Good.
And it wasn't just a big deal because I was going to college, but the expense associated with that was something that they felt pretty strongly about, right? Yeah. That, you know, I'm not entitled to this. This is something they have to earn. Mm-hmm. And because of the investment, you have to do well.
Yeah. I love that you say you were told and you understood at the time that it was not an entitlement. It was a privilege to get to do that higher education.
Right. So I graduated from DePaul University in Greencastle, Indiana, with a double major in chemistry and zoology. Back in those days, they didn't have biology departments, they had zoology departments.
Oh.
And when I was in school, because I had a double science major, I was in labs 4 days a week.
Right.
So all of my college roommates thought that I worked way too hard because I was in school. I was in classes like all day long. Yeah. And then at night I had to study. And so I didn't have a lot of time to do anything but.
Yeah.
Except I was in sports. But
what sports did you play?
So I played volleyball.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. I'm a short little thing, but I was a setter.
We're going to have to bring you to Malawi. We just set up a volleyball court there, and they took to it real fast. They loved it.
Is it a sand court?
Nope, it's a dirt court.
Okay.
But it still works. So you were a double major. in labs, in class all the time, and you were playing volleyball. When you were in school, did you already know what you wanted to do with your education? What kind of drove you into your career?
So I thought that I wanted to go to medical school,
Mm-hmm.
but by the time I got to be a senior and I was applying to medical schools, I had talked to a few physicians, and they told me that being a doctor isn't, I mean, it's great if you want to take care of people and care for people and that kind of thing, but you see basically the same things over and over and over again.
Mm-hmm.
And I decided that I probably needed a little bit more intellectual challenge. And so I decided to go do a PhD in chemistry. And to be honest with you, at that time, I always thought that I would be in academics. I thought I was going to be a teacher.
How long were you in school with a double major and then you went on to a PhD? How many years of education after high school?
9 years of education.
Wow.
Yeah. 4 years undergraduate and then 5 years to get my PhD.
Wow. And so you think you're going to go and stay in academics, but then right. What changed?
So I started off at the University of so I did my PhD at Notre Dame.
Okay.
And I was able to stay on in a non-tenure track position where I could continue the research that I was doing, but I was also teaching medical students. So I taught first-year medical students. I taught biochemistry for first-year medical students. But then a tenure track position opened up at St. Mary's College, which is right across the street from Notre Dame. And one of the reasons why we wanted to stay here was my husband and I had committed that we would stay local in our area as long as our parents were alive, because they were aging and we kind of wanted to just be there for them.
That's wonderful.
So I was really fortunate that I always had these opportunities opening up for me. So I went to St. Mary's College, and it was an undergraduate college. And I had funding, I had grants, but I had students that wanted to work with me. And I was, teaching, I taught 2 classes a semester. So basically 6 contact hours plus a lab. So basically I was, 10 contact hours with students plus office hours plus working in the lab. And after 3 years, I kind of said, I think I'm bored. So I was looking in the newspaper and I saw this ad for an orthopedic implant company. And I said, that's my next job. And then the rest is just history, right? So yeah. I saw an ad for DePuy Orthopedics, and I joined them in 1989, and they eventually were bought by Johnson & Johnson, and that's where I retired from.
How many years were you with those companies in total?
So I was there for 28 years.
28 years.
Yeah.
What are some of the projects that you worked on, if you can tell us, or were they top secret?
It was a long time ago. Nothing's top secret anymore. So I worked on projects that were looking at ways that we could use biological materials to enhance wound healing. So healing of bones and tendons and joints. So I did some projects where we were looking at cartilage repair.
Mm-hmm.
I was looking at growth factors to enhance bone healing and cartilage healing and tendon healing. I had a project where I was using small intestine submucosa, which is basically sausage casing from pigs, that we were using as a repair tissue, a material that could be used to repair tissues.
Yeah.
So that kind of stuff.
That's so incredible because, I think particularly in our country, we really take medicine for granted. We just assume that, when something breaks, it's easily fixable here because we have great doctors and we have great technology. But all of that was developed over a long period of time with a lot of blood, sweat, and tears from people who went through all the education you went through and all the research that you had to do. And so that's awesome to hear, kind of just the backstory for how you get to those great progressions in medicine, because there was so much behind it. So Pam, thank you for sharing about your career and your education. You generously volunteer time with more than one organization, both locally and globally. Why does volunteerism matter to you so much? Where did you get the volunteerism bug?
I was just talking to my husband about that because I'm not sure. Because I think growing up, I was ingrained that when you receive gifts, you give gifts back.
Mm-hmm.
We've been blessed with so much. It's just kind of a no-brainer to want to be able to spread our blessings. We believe in giving to areas that are focused on improving people's lives, not by giving them things, but by teaching them how to improve their lives. So in other words, I don't think that we necessarily, our volunteerism is more focused on enabling individuals to become self-sustaining.
Yeah, creating opportunities, better opportunities for people.
Right.
Yeah, that's one of the things that we started saying about BTCV. We say better education creates better jobs, and a better job is the only way out of poverty. And I don't know that we had really connected those well in the first 5 years, or even in the 3 years following that. But at some point, we started saying that, and it clicked. It was like, this is what we're really doing. What we're really doing isn't just giving a kid a school or a teacher a desk. What we're really doing is creating an opportunity for them to get through more education more efficiently so that they can make advances in their own community through better jobs. So what did you learn most from your career that translates into your volunteerism today, both as an advisor and a team leader?
There's two things that come to mind. The first is our greatest talent is people. And as a leader, your role is to enable people to get things done and get out of their way. So you remove obstacles, you make it easy for them to be able to do what it is that they do well, and you let them do it.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that that's really important as a team leader. When I'm leading teams, I want to make sure that people are doing, number one, learning new things, if they want to learn new things, but also volunteering in ways that give them a sense of satisfaction. Because, the other thing is the leaders, they have to keep everybody safe and on task. But it's enabling people.
What's an example? So you've got a team in Peru, and you've got all these different walks of life. You've got accountants, teachers, general contractors. What's a good example of saying, I can trust this person to handle this and take my hands off it so that I can focus on something else?
I think when we start the day, we go over what the jobs are.
Uh-huh.
And then people kind of volunteer for what they want to do.
Okay.
And if they don't volunteer for something, I might pair them up with a more experienced person.
That makes sense. Yeah.
So that they're learning on the job. People are really reluctant to saw for the first time.
Yeah.
They're reluctant sometimes even to hammer nails, right?
Uh-huh.
You have some people that want to jump in and do everything, and then you have others that kind of hang back a little bit. And I think that it's important to get those people that hang back a little bit involved and active.
Yeah.
And so kind of keep an eye on the team and keep an eye on the team members and figure out who's comfortable doing what, and make sure that they're engaged.
That's fantastic. So my dad was also a contractor. He was an electrical contractor and an engineer, but he was very hands-on. And so I grew up using tools. And you, of course, are familiar with tools because of your experience with your dad. And so I've just learned exactly what you're saying, not to use myself as the metric for measuring what everybody else should be able to do on the team. We have people who come on projects that have never sawed a board before and never hammered a nail before. And that's actually, I think that's great. It's really a cool thing that they're going to get to try this new thing. And of course, those same people have done things that I've never tried before, that I've never done before, which is why the team dynamic is so cool.
Even little jobs, though, are really important. Holding a ladder for somebody that's painting a wall.
Right. Absolutely.
Holding the boards when somebody's sawing can make a huge difference between a cut going really well and not going so well.
Yeah. Yeah.
So just
two kinds of cuts, really, an accident cut and a good cut. And we've been, knock on wood, very fortunate to be very low on accidents, taking so many lay people to do these projects because we have a focus on safety. And like you said, that's your number one priority as a team leader, is the team safety and watching and seeing those things. But those are perfect examples. When we say you don't have to have construction experience, those are perfect examples of something that a non-experienced construction person can come and do and be very, very helpful. It's a necessary job.
It is.
So Pam, let's talk about your travels with BTCV. Share where you've been with BTCV and a bit about those projects.
So I started off in Guatemala, and
Mm-hmm.
I think it was 2011. We were building a school with actually some school rooms for handicapped children in, oh, I don't even remember the name of the village anymore.
The organization was Asali.
Yeah,
I think about the name of the village.
but that was my first build. Um, the classroom was pretty much already done. We dug a lot of drainage around the classroom and put in gutters and poured some cement and
Uh-huh.
painted the classroom. And we also spent some time with the kids. And, kids with disability are just it's so easy to make them happy, right?
Uh-huh.
Just by engaging with them and
Mm-hmm.
talking with them and doing something fun with them. And so that was really rewarding. That's one of the things I love about Be the Change is that, you're partnering with an organization and a community and you work with them.
Yes.
You're working side by side with members of the community. You're working side by side with the kids. You're interacting with the kids that are using the classrooms.
This is not a drive-by organization. We don't drive by, get off a bus, take photos, get back on the bus and leave. This is a very get involved, get together, hold hands kind of organization.
Yeah. So that was in 2011. And the reason why I went on that build was so Jimmy and I had known each other. He did a lot of research with me.
Yeah. Our co-founder, Jimmy Cook. Yep.
Yeah. And so he kept talking about it. And I said, I'll go on a build. I'll go on a build. I'll go on a build. And so Guatemala was easy because it's not too much of a time change.
Mm-hmm.
And my husband went with me, and he's a difficult traveler. So we do easy travel for him. So
He loves you, Pam. Let's just say that. He doesn't love travel, but he loves you.
He does. He does. That was really, kind of where we started. And then in 2013, there was the trip to Peru.
Okay.
And I said, oh, I really want to do that one. So that was my first trip to Peru.
Uh-huh.
And I think I'm coming up on my 8th one now.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So when you go to Peru, and you've served many times in Peru, and in addition, Neil is also very generous, and he's been to Peru. You're very generous supporters of that total campus. What about Peru did you find most appealing, and what brings you back every year, year after year?
So number one, the community. It's almost like a second home for us.
Wow.
Well, especially for me, because I've been there so many times, and
Mm-hmm.
coming back and seeing the community members and seeing the kids have grown up. And, there's kids that, helped us when they were in first grade. They're
Yeah.
in high school now, right?
A finished high school.
Yeah, and some of them have finished high school. And so, that connection with the community. To be honest with you, God has put Peru on our hearts.
Yeah.
And it's just a commitment that we feel compelled to honor.
Talk to me about, because when you go to Peru, you've participated in some of our site assessment. And when we do a site assessment, we sit down with parents, teachers, students, and we go through just a list of questions because we're continually trying to evaluate the project and areas where we need to maybe change directions or improve. But when you do that, you also get to hear some stories. Talk to me a bit about some of those conversations that you've had, maybe with mothers or with teachers. Or even students.
Well, one that stands out is one of the students that was in the high school.
Mm-hmm.
And her mother was actually one of the teachers. So she had moved to El Chino because her mother was a teacher at the school. And she was just so excited by the school, by the classes that they offered. And she hoped that her mother would continue to teach in El Chino so that she could finish her high school career there. But it was just the enthusiasm that she had. And, her saying that this was the best village school that she'd ever been at.
Wow. And that's a serious compliment, because if her mom is a teacher, she's probably been to multiple schools. The governments rotate teachers regularly. Right. And so she's seen other examples. And so that's a great endorsement for the project in and of itself.
The other thing is that, you asked about the parents, and,
yes,
the 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 way that they care for the school, the way that they come and work with us. They talk about, there's such a sense of ownership for that school within the community. They truly view it as a blessing and a gift and they take ownership for it.
Yeah. And sometimes that can be very difficult to get a community to adopt because, education is so part of our culture here, but not necessarily in some of the places we go. And so trying to get them to adopt that this school is very, very special and get them to sacrifice, hours that a student might be helping with chores at the house or hours that they might be helping with the family's income. They've really got to believe in it. And so in Peru, as you said, they've really adopted the value of education. They get it and they're involved. What do you see, Pam, as the biggest challenges to education for students in Peru, in Chino, or any of the other villages you've been to? What are some of the biggest challenges that they face?
So I think, when we initially started going there, the high school was a one-room school. And I think that the kids shared desks and the teachers didn't have desks. And I think that even now in the primary school that we're working on now,
yes,
the primary school was a 2-classroom school. So you had grades basically 1 through 8 in our language. It's probably 6 years in their school, but all of them in 2 classrooms. So I think that can be sometimes difficult for students. I don't think it's an ideal environment. I think it's good because older students help younger students. But I think that the teachers can get pulled in so many different directions because they have so many students at different levels that they have to. So as we've built out the school in Peru, there's a classroom now for each grade in the high school. And eventually there'll be 1 classroom per 2 grades for each primary school student. So, I think that that's made a big difference. There's desks for the students. The teachers have desks. I can remember when we built the first teacher desk, right?
Yeah.
And teachers crying because they've never had a desk before.
Yeah, absolutely.
So all of those things I think make a difference.
I remember asking a teacher, what do you think at the end of the project? And I was asking, what do you think of the building? I was kind of put my hand out and pointed at the building. And she said, it's incredible. I've never had a desk before. And that just shows you that, we think we're doing one thing that's the most important. And I think, it's the building. It's the big, big building. And for her, it was the tools to do her job better. It was the tools that she needed to do her job better, a desk. So yeah, those are great stories. So other than classrooms and desks, what are some of the other ways that BTCV is addressing the underlying issues in education that you see?
I think number 1, providing an opportunity in the location. So, the students typically have to travel, can potentially have to travel long ways to get any kind of specialized education.
Yeah.
So I think having something there in the village certainly makes education easier.
Yeah, access is critical.
Many of the parents have limited education as well. And I think that, they've talked about having opportunities to expand evening classes for the adults so that they can expand their education as well. And I think that commitment is really important because I think that the parents want to be engaged in educating their students and allowing them to get some additional training helps them with that.
Yeah.
And I think that the other piece of it is when we first started going, I think that there was some skepticism as to whether or not this would really make a difference in their community. And I think that, as you said, there was skepticism because, it's a village of fishermen, really. And they go out and they fish early morning hours into the, almost all day. And if you're in school, you can't be fishing. But I think that what we've seen is that there's a commitment to the education. And there's also a commitment to alternative careers for their children as well.
Right.
And I think that Dolly, our partner there, has worked really hard to make possible some of those options for some of the other students. And I think that every parent wants what's best for their child.
Yeah. Yeah. We talk a lot about, when we do those assessments, particularly the phase 1 assessment, we'll go in and talk to communities about the schools. And the first thing that we really get the feeling of is this real? Are they really going to come back? Because time and time again, I hear, well, they get lots of promises made. Don't make promises to these people you can't keep, and that's critical. But I also get when people say, this guy got an education and he's still a taxi driver. This guy got an education and he's still a fisherman, just like his father. And one of the things that we've started discussing with parents is, once you get an education, you have a different kind of power. Number one, you can be a better taxi driver. You can be a better fisherman. You can operate better in the marketplace, better than your father did. And there's nothing wrong with those jobs. Those are good jobs, but wouldn't you like to do it better? Wouldn't you like to manage your finances and your household better because you have an education? And then the other side of education, it just enriches your life. Literacy, for example, just enriches your life and allows you to enjoy things that you couldn't have enjoyed before. So yeah, we talk about that with parents now a lot, and really, digging into BTCV long term is how we've learned that we need to really communicate that. And you can only do it if you have a relationship and you're there on the ground.
I think when we first started going there, I think there was a skepticism, and I think that there was a concern that this would take all of the kids out of the community and move them into Iquitos or into other areas, and that they would lose that village lifestyle, right?
Yeah.
But I don't think that that's been the case. And I think many of the students remain in the community.
Yeah.
But there are some students that leave and some students that come back.
Yeah.
And I think that overall, it leads to a more fulfilling, right? Not necessarily that you're not that you're still a fisherman, or you're still, like you say, a taxi driver, but there's other ways that you experience the world that gives you more fulfillment in life.
Exactly. Yes. So Pam, we thrive on volunteers traveling with us on these projects. It is a key mechanism for completing our mission. And we always tell people that the building is only half of our mission. Relationships are the other half. And we can't do relationships without volunteers. So what would you tell a traveler that's on the fence about going on a BTCV trip? Now, you've been on so many at this point and you're very experienced, but think back to 2010 when you were thinking about traveling in 2011. What would you tell someone who's on the fence about going on a trip for any reason, whether it's funding, time away from work, time away from life? What would you say to encourage them to take the next step and join a volunteer team?
I would tell them that you get so much more than you give. So even though we're there to help them with their school, they give so much back to us personally. I think it changes the way that you view the world. We're so used to what we have here in the US and the luxuries that, we live very luxuriously.
Yeah. Very comfortably.
Very comfortably. And when you go there, we stay in very comfortable accommodations, but you come to appreciate the things that you have.
Yeah.
That we just take for granted. The other piece of it is that the enrichment of that cultural exchange, even though you may not speak the language, when you and someone from the community are working together to sweep the floor or nail windows or paint a building or whatever, you learn to communicate, not necessarily with words, but in other ways.
Yeah.
And that's enriching in and of itself as well.
Absolutely. Pam, thank you so much for sharing so much of your story today. I loved getting to know more about it. I'm sure our listeners are going to enjoy it as well. Thank you for your service, and thank Neil for participating as well. And thank you for your generosity and being stakeholders in our mission at Be the Change Volunteers. We are grateful for you.
Thank you, Grant. It's been a blessing to work with Be the Change.
Thanks for joining us for another Changer Chat. If you like Changer Chats, check out more of them online at www.btcv.us. Your financial gifts make our mission possible, so you can give